Well, a happy Wednesday to everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us as we continue our midweek Bible study going in the book of Daniel and finishing chapter 1 today. And we pick up with verse 18. And as we recap in previous lesson, the Daniel and the three other young men with him were going on a diet test, if you will. They were going to refuse the king's food, refuse that which was not kosher, not killed properly, not prepared properly, most likely sacrificed and dedicated to the pagan gods that, of course, they wanted to stay free from. And so they said, give us some peas and beans, some vegetables and water, and we'll be just fine. And so they did this test for 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, there was a noticeable improvement and a difference in these four men versus all the other ones. And we don't know how many other ones there were, but the other ones that ate the king's meat and drank the king's beverages, and they looked worse than what these four guys did. And so their overseer said, "Got me convinced. Let's go for it." And we get this as we pick up in verse 18 that 3 years have gone by. So between our last verse and this verse, 3 years worth of time of Daniel and his three compadres just eating the same food. Now, again, they had a heart truly dedicated to do what God wanted them to do. And again, no word of them complaining, of saying, oh man, can't I have something else to drink other than water? Can't I have something else to eat? Um, all we know is that they were truly dedicated. They were truly committed to this task that they were in of doing the studying, of eating the diet that they felt was honoring to God. What an incredible testimony. What an incredible example of a disciplined lifestyle, which is something that is very challenging to do. Discipline in life, not only in spiritual matters, but in just all forms of life. To undertake that, whether you're right now, the Olympics are going on, and you look and marvel at the lives that these young people have lived and the discipline that they have put themselves through for years and years to get to a place where they could try to win a medal and to compete in these events. Most of us have no idea what they have sacrificed and gone through, and it falls under the term of discipline. And there are many times when I look at those examples and I feel somewhat ashamed. I feel humbled saying, okay, if they can do that for that type of prize, and it's a great thing, it's great to be in shape and to do that and compete, and I enjoy all of it. But what about my life? What about the things that I can do that will help draw me closer to God, that will help me stay on a pathway where I can be the best example for him and the best example to a world who may not see any other example of God except what they see in me. And so I'm challenged by this and just kind of sharing that because of, the Olympics that are going on. And I want to be motivated. I want to be disciplined. The early followers of Jesus were called disciples just for that reason, that people saw their life and saw that it was different than others, and they saw the discipline that it took. And discipline is difficult, very, very difficult. But yet here we see another example in these four young men that they, for 3 years, stayed on this disciplined lifestyle of learning and diet. And so at the end of these 3 years, the king said that they should be brought in. And so the chief of the eunuchs brought them before Nebuchadnezzar, and he interviewed them. And the king, however he did this, I'm really not sure. Um, and what's interesting here is the words, verse 19, it's vai daber. And this word daber is the Hebrew, there are two words for uh, giving the indication that words were spoken and words were exchanged. One is amar and one is davar. And so davar or daber are thought to be words that are deeper. And some people would say that they're words from the heart. They are words that are not frivolous. They're kind of like words that, when someone's on in their last stages of life and they call the family near to them and they say something to them, that's Devar. Um, and so the king devoured them. He used words that were deep, meaningful, and meaningful to him. And so that's translated here as interviewed. And so the king tested them. And what's interesting here is it says, um, Itam Amelech velo nimsa, and there was none found mikulam among them, Kadaniel, like Daniel, and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and there was none like them. And it says they served Lifnei Hamelech before the king. Lifnei is a very interesting word we see throughout the Bible in Hebrew, and it has the word face in it. Panei is the word for face, and so the lamed preposition means to the face of, translated before. We understand that, but it's a little bit more intimate. They were in the presence of, they saw the face of the king, and so it's indicating that they were front and center. They didn't see him from the back, they didn't see him from the side. They were face to face with the king in their service, and makes a statement here that are just interesting. V'chal davar, and here's that word davar again, translated as matters, things, or words. Chokhmat, of wisdom. Binah, of understanding. And the king examined them, and here's a really interesting cliche, asher yadot, which translates as to 10 hands. Well, what does 10 hands mean? The English translations will say that they were many times or 10 times more, but it really is translated literally 10 hands. And it kind of gives us the impression of what we will use, and we'll say that, that was hands down the best thing I've ever seen, or hands down they were the winner. And so that's a very similar expression, and it's interesting. You see that in the original language, that there are these euphemisms or colloquialisms, cliches, however you want to phrase it, that are used to say what they felt. It was words that related to their everyday language. So the king is saying, hands down, these guys are better than my magicians and astrologers who were in his realm. And then we close out this chapter by saying, that they continued until the year of Darius or Cyrus the king. I've not taken the time to go and look at some of the Hebrew commentary past couple of weeks, so we're going to catch up on that today. And so here we see, starting at this green line for verses 18 through 21, that he spoke with them. The sages feel he submitted them to an examination, subjects being drawn from the current sciences and literatures. Um, and they stood before the king, and of course talks about this wisdom and understanding. And of course, we just talked about the idiomatic expression about the hands down. What's also interesting is that the king was surrounded by people. He had his advisors. He had, here it's used the word magicians. And in these words, again, I struggle, and I know I've mentioned this maybe before, to understand what was a magician, what was an enchanter, what was a soothsayer, what was an astrologer. Um, I know what it means to me today. I struggle to understand it. What could it have meant to them at those times? Obviously, superstitions were at a higher level maybe than what we have today. We in this Western culture live in a world of science. We want to see everything proven. We want to see what degree someone has. We want to know that, the data is correct. But yet you see many who follow things that aren't based upon such things, and that there are superstitions, there are traditions, there are things that we follow because we feel it's right from our heart. There are things we follow and we don't have any physical evidence or scientific evidence to support them. And that's how we feel today in our time. Can you imagine what it was like back then when they didn't have the sciences? All they had was people who would maybe trick them, would maybe have illusions and have things that, for their own benefit to try to make themselves look good, try to win favor, try to be in this position next to the king where they could influence them and maybe even exhibit fear over the people to display things that would make them fearful and make themselves feel like they were a prominent, important person, that people would fear them. So again, just very interesting. Some of these words for magicians and enchanters have very limited use. Here, this word is used only here in the book of Daniel for enchanter. And so this continued that they stood in the presence of the king for quite a long time. It's the first year of King Cyrus was approximately 538 BC, and so this means that this was 70 years. So they had, the 3 years of testing, and after this were, 67 years that they would have stood before the king, estimating that Daniel was quite an aged man and being 85 or 90 years of age. Now, this is interesting because later on it will call the other Hebrew children young men. So, again, the perspective of how old was Daniel? How old were these others? Was their diet something that kept them looking young and kept them from, showing the age like maybe that some of the others did that ate the king's diet, which was probably not a very healthy diet. And so, very interesting to see all of that. So I hope you enjoy this. We're going to end chapter 1 here, and we're going to pick up in chapter 2 next week, and things get really interesting. This is getting into the meat of the dreams and all what Daniel is all about. So again, I appreciate you sticking around, appreciate you enjoying this. Hope you come back and continue with us next week. Take care, all of you. Bye bye.